What's up? I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dakota.
And this is the Bourbon and Business Podcast,
where we interview successful businessmen and women to let you in on why success doesn't have a single formula to follow.
We also have a little bourbon tasting along the way, because why not?
Why not?
So guys, please enjoy this episode and let us know your thoughts at Bourbon and Business Podcast on Instagram.
Coming to you from the Bourbon and Business Studios here at IPS in Flowood, Mississippi. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dakota.
And this is the Bourbon and Business Podcast. How you doing this morning, Dakota?
I'm lovely, Tyler.
Well,
how are you?
I'm glad to hear that you're doing good. I'm doing well myself.
I'm doing lovely.
You're doing lovely. Well, We've got some beautiful weather, some football weather, so we're getting into football season.
It's a beautiful
great
day.
Time of the year.
Yep.
And do you want to introduce our guests to us?
I do. Today we have special guest, Dr. Frank Clark, psychiatrist, poet, children's book author, and lyricist. Dr. Clark, welcome.
Thank you both. I appreciate it, and I look forward to having a wonderful discussion with you both.
Yep, we're glad to have you. And then what are we sipping on?
We are sipping on Oak and Eden in bottle finished. Okay, so this is fired French oak, wheat and spire flavor, and there's French oak spirals actually in the bottle. You can see it, you can shake the bottle and it moves around.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can tell the oak finish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess probably because they leave it in the bottle too after it sits there. So, I'm gonna have to give it I feel like I've been giving out a lot of 9s here lately, but I mean, I just got to
like alcohol.
I got to be honest with how I feel about it. I might have to give it a 9.4.
9.4. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good.
That's really strong, dude.
And I didn't think that I would like it as much with the finish, but
it's a very dark color.
Yeah.
Like you can tell that it's going to be a heavy oak flavor.
But it's not overpowering though.
Yeah.
The first sip is a little bit, but after the second sip's where you taste it. So, well, Dr. Clark, we appreciate you coming on. We'd like to take this time, just tell our listeners where you're from, your background, and then how you got to the point of, you're doing a lot of stuff, so how you got to the point of all the things that you're doing.
I appreciate the question. So I'm originally from Chicago, which makes me a diehard Bulls fan. I grew up watching Michael Jordan play, especially during those years with Dennis Rodman.
So let's go ahead and clear this out. So is he the GOAT?
It's undeniable.
Yeah.
We're in agreement.
Yeah,
We're in agreement.
I'm in agreement.
I appreciate that. It's good to have a consensus.
Yeah.
But yes, grew up on the south side of Chicago. I grew up in a home where my mother, she was a Chicago public school teacher. She's now retired. Also grew up with a father who had a sporadic presence in my life, and that shaped me in many ways moving forward. I tend to reflect on my path as looking at a journey of light and darkness. So if I reflect on some fond memories from my childhood, I would say it was growing up watching the Chicago Bulls, my beloved Chicago Cubs, watching Bruce Lee movies. I'm a huge martial arts fan, going to the skating rink, and growing up with one of my childhood best friends. So that was the light of my journey. As I reflect on the darkness of my journey, it was filled with an identity crisis, really trying to tap into who I was as a person, who I was as a child, who had many adverse childhood experiences. And those childhood experiences are those that happened prior to 18 that really shape who we are, our personal growth. And they can have a profound impact on our overall health outcomes. So for example, growing up, I would say that I experienced emotional neglect, emotional abuse, and there was definitely some dysfunction in my household. So as I went throughout my path, one of the things that continued to allow me to grow and has continued to allow me to grow has been my Christian faith, although that was rocky at some points, but also my motivation to continue to be light for myself and for others. And so thankfully, I was raised with a mother who wanted me to have early exposure to the arts, as well as to educational opportunities. And that is when I started to develop this passion, this affinity for wanting to help people. I believe that seeing my father go through his own health struggles as it related to Parkinson's disease and other medical conditions, I really took a liking to, or a fascination, I should say, with how the human body functions and what happens when the human body malfunctions. And through my exposure through pipeline programs, those programs that give us early exposure to STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math, I really started to think about what is it that I want to do? What type of legacy do I want to leave when I'm on my deathbed and I take my final breath? And that's how I came into the field of medicine. As it relates to psychiatry, I would say that my path, in terms of my lived experience of going through my own depression, at one point contemplating suicide when I then needed help and was actually hospitalized at one point before I went to medical school, really opened my eyes to all those things that I had repressed at an early age. And so as I look forward throughout my life, I would say that suffering has been a gift, even though it was painful at the time when I was walking through that wilderness. And that brings me to where we are today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a beautiful story here.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the story of a lot of people that are successful. You know, there's always the negative things that happen in their life that, you know, push them to the point that they're at today. And I think if you ask any of those, you know, they probably wouldn't change it because they wouldn't know what the outcome would be otherwise.
But they also probably wouldn't want to do it again.
One question I have for you on that, because it's always been an interest for me, but you have people that have the negative things happen in their life and then they turn it into a positive, and then their life, you know, they seem to become, you know, successful or whatever. But then you also see the opposite effect. And you can even see it in the same household, you know, siblings.
Yeah,
you can see,
twins even.
You can see one sibling go on to be successful and then the other one struggle throughout their life. What really, in your opinion, what really causes someone to take one path or the other?
That's a great question. I would say that we have to think about the environment that people are living in. I think we all can think back to our own childhoods and think about the role of mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back to this word I used earlier, belonging. Everybody wants to belong. And so you can have two people, or we'll say siblings, in the same household, and they're both wanting to belong. They may have a different personality structure of what that means for them. We have to think about that not every individual is the same. And so how you approach one child in the household may not work for the other sibling. And so it's really goes back to a curiosity of what is going to make both of those individuals flourish. What I have found in my experience in working in a variety of clinical environments, including my local detention center here in Greenville, South Carolina, is that a lot of individuals have trauma in their life. And in my clinical opinion and professional opinion, I don't think people are choosing to go down the wayward path. I think that they are in a sense of psychological survival. So what do I mean by that? If you have been told constantly throughout your life that you are worthless, that you are not good enough, that no one is going to love you, and you consistently grow up in an environment where you were feeling invalidated, then you start to look elsewhere for that validation, even if it is going to be deleterious to your health. Because again, you just want to belong. So going back to your example, you can take two siblings. Let's call them Jim and Tom. Jim, excellent student, whatever that means. Okay. So doing well for what we would consider doing well. But his sibling also wants to do well, but he's having a difficult time. And what I think we are missing in our society, instead of coming down on the sibling and saying, well, you're nothing like your brother. Why can't you be like him? Why can't you do the things that he is doing? We need to be asking what has happened to you or what is happening to you in your school environment or outside that is resulting in these behaviors that are something that we have not seen before. Why is that important? Many of students or individuals go through bullying. And if you are being bullied, it's hard for you to want to concentrate in the classroom. It's hard for you to want to have that affinity for learning. you value education, but how can you learn when people are picking on you, not just in that environment, when you go home and you turn on social media? And so then what does that do? Then you start to continue to have these perpetual feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness. So where do you turn? You turn to people who are going to accept you, because if you are not getting validated at home and you're not getting validated at school, the streets will validate you. They will just validate you in a way that we know leads to poor outcomes, that
Mm.
being gangs. So the last thing I'll say about that, gangs are very effective. They're very effective at recruiting and retaining people because they foster a sense of belonging. Although we know that that is a false hope that they are promising, it can be effective. So I hope that answers your question in terms of,
No.
kind
No,
of going
it
wayward versus kind of staying on the straight and narrow path.
It for sure does. And, there's other vices too that kids can find aside from gangs. I mean, they can turn to pornography, alcoholism, drug addiction, becoming the bully in the class. There's all kinds of stuff. And I think, my mind always comes back to this argument of like nature versus nurture. And I know that's like a huge argument in the medical world and the psychiatric world, I'm sure. But what, in your opinion, is one more powerful than the other? Because I used to be heavy on the side of, nurture for sure, nurture for sure, nurture for sure. Now that I have 2 young kids, I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of nature, just naturally who they are as people. Because like, I'm an anxious person naturally. My oldest, he's like very cautious around stuff. And I'm like, I didn't teach him that. Like he just knows it. So what's your take on that?
Absolutely. This is personal for me as well, because I'm a father. I have a 6-year-old daughter. So I hear you loud and clear. I think there's an element of both.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have one or the other. So what we know is that there is a genetic component as it relates to anxiety or depression, or individuals that have bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, substance use disorders. And then we also know that there is the environmental component. And so there is this, we call it epigenetics, and how our genes can be modified and how trauma can be intergenerational. It can be passed down.
Mm.
So yes, our children may have different temperaments. My daughter, for example, she loves being on the stage when it comes to dancing. She's in hip hop class right now.
Nice.
Not shy at all.
Yeah.
But if you want her to read a book in front of the class, it's not happening.
Yeah. Crazy.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
And so we have to be mindful as parents, and not just as parents, as nurturers, right? Because whether we are parents or not, we are all in charge of nurturing our future generation. And so, to your point, we have to be mindful of the temperaments of each individual. And that's how God created us,
Yeah.
unique, with our own skill set and our own areas of growth. So I look at it as a combination of nature and nurture. But I think we also need to step back and allow children to be who they are going to be. And sometimes I think as parents, I don't know if this is true for you all, but as parents, we tend to project onto our children what we want them to do or how we want them to be. I just know from personal experience that growing up in a household where you were to be seen and not heard, I try to do the opposite because I know that that wasn't effective for me. But again, our parents, they do the best that they can with the resources that they have. And so we have to do the best that we can, while knowing that children, they may not listen to everything that we say, but they are watching everything that we do.
That's a good word. That's a great word.
Another question I have for you, like me and Dakota, we grew up in the 90s. So obviously our childhood was a lot different than, our children are experiencing. What type of effect are phones and tablets and, all these, now it's a short clip. When you watch something, it may last 10 seconds versus, we would sit down for 30 minutes or an hour and watch a show.
And bright colors and stuff. Yeah.
What type of effects are these having on our kids today?
I'm so happy that you raised that question. So there's a book that I encourage everyone to read, and I think you all would enjoy it as well. It's called The Anxious Generation, and it's by Dr. Jonathan Haidt, capital Haidt. And he alludes to to your question, and what I would say is that I don't think that we should necessarily criminalize social media. There are aspects of it that can be important. I use social media to spread mental health awareness. So there's the positive, but to your point, Dakota and Tyler, there is the negative. And so you and I, so I'm a child of the 80s. And I also remember growing up where you would sit down on a Friday and you had TGIF Fridays. I remember watching Full House and Family Matters, right? You guys remember those shows.
Yes.
Cosby Show, right? These were wholesome shows that really poured into you as a human being, and you wanted to be these individuals, you wanted to be these characters, you aspired to be like them, you wanted to emulate them. But now we are in this universe or society where we are having short bursts of dopamine that are being stimulated in our brain, and we know dopamine can be that pleasure neurotransmitter, that chemical in our brain that lights up when we love to exercise. It gets an extra boost, so to speak. And addiction, right? It could be drugs, alcohol, pornography, as you mentioned earlier. And for our kids, there's actually literature now showing that these shorts, I'm guilty as charged, YouTube and Instagram, these reels, these shorts can actually have negative impacts on our brain. And you think about our frontal lobe, our brain that allows us to make rational decisions is fully developed. But for our children, they're still developing that frontal lobe. And so they're not going to be as rational as you and I would be. So it's very addicting, right? When you watch one short, and these are how these algorithms are built. They know that you're going to want to watch another one. So I actually think these shorts can actually be more damaging to the brain than beneficial. I think we have to get back to sitting down as a family and introducing our children to the shows that we grew up with, and or getting them outside and enjoying nature, because nature is going to help develop that frontal lobe more than a YouTube short. And getting them outside and playing in the dirt and communing with one another, fellowshipping with people in the neighborhood. We don't do that anymore. It's almost like a lost art. So I am all for promoting a healthy use of social media, but not to the extent where it is impacting people's ability to function.
That's a great word. And I was thinking too, just about like TV shows and stuff. And, you mentioned like The Cosby Show and Family Matters, Full House, like all those shows. All those TV shows also had like a great moral to the story. Like every episode, it was like, a kid did something and an adult had to, parent them, or the parent did something wrong and had to go apologize to the kid. Like it was a great interaction. It taught you how to like apologize for certain things, how to have empathy in certain situations. Like there was all kinds of different things. And now I look at like cartoons and stuff for kids and I'm like, what was the point in that? It was just a song. Like, you know what I mean? Like there was no purpose behind it. It was just entertainment.
Well, and to that point, I think that is where our society is at. I guess the question I would pose for us as a country, where are our values? What are we willing to invest in? And so are we more invested in entertainment, or are we more invested in educating our children? And education doesn't happen just in the classroom, right? You so eloquently pointed out that when we were growing up with TV, I mean, I even remember the Golden Girls. There was morals to these stories, and we could talk about it with our family. We could be curious. Now, I think that curiosity is almost lost. Now, there are some exceptions. What is the show? Dango Tiger. I will use that as an example.
Yeah.
That's based off of Mr. Rogers. I think that is a great cartoon that can illustrate a lot of morals. Overall, I think reality TV is not reality. It is.
Yes.
It's a lot of hyperbole. And so when we get into hyperbole, that really can be destructive. So I do hope that moving forward, that the next generation will have, that we can get back to these wholesome shows. And I don't know about you all, but my wife and I have started rewatching shows of the 80s and 90s. And as an adult now, I have so much more of an appreciation for those shows and what they taught us. And now I can think back on those shows and say, oh, that's the point that they were trying to illustrate, or that was the theme of that episode. I can't say that so much now for the TV that has been streaming on our news, on our airwaves.
I also read story, and I think I've shared this on the podcast before, with this mom who said, you know, she was letting her kids watch like all the new shows, and then all her kids, like, it was just, she was like, they didn't have manners. Like, no matter what I said, they wouldn't listen, like all this stuff. She said that she changed it to only 90s TV shows for their kids, and they hated it at first. And then all of a sudden they started loving them. I'm talking about like Magic School Bus, like that kind of stuff for her kids. And she said she noticed the behavior change within like 2 weeks of watching those shows. Like, it was, the colors weren't as bright, the changing of scenes wasn't as fast, wasn't as quick. And so it was, their attention spans grew, like they were able to focus on things. And she said their behavior was just magically better. It was like magic, is what she said in this article that I read. And I was like, I wonder if there's anything to that.
I think there is. I think it's also as you were speaking about that, it made me think about how we're looking at our nutrition and
good point.
as a society. Yeah. It's almost akin to ultra processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
If you removed ultra processed foods from homes, I guarantee you attention spans would improve.
Mm-hmm.
Emotional regulation would improve. Same with TV. So it's not surprising to me that, again, when you are just inundated, when the brain is inundated with so many vivid colors and there's this fast pace, it's hard for a young brain that is still developing and laying down synapses, those connections between our nerve cells, our neurons in the body. How can we expect kids to concentrate?
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, one question I have for you, and it kind of happened in our childhood when we were probably getting into the junior high school years, but you saw more and more kids being placed on ADHD medicine.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a place for it, but
it was almost like a time bomb. Like, which one of my friends is going to pop up in the next week and be like, yeah, I'm on Adderall now. Yeah.
And so you had that, you know, heavily prescribed to kids because they couldn't pay attention in class, probably more than likely just being kids.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think the best kid is kind of hard to pay attention for 8 hours in class. But anyways, that was prescribed pretty heavily. And then now we have this huge opiate epidemic. How are those tied together? And is there a way for us to kind of turn that around?
Yes, we could probably talk about this all day, but I will give you a brief encapsulation. I'll try to encapsulate it in a way that answers your question regarding the opiate epidemic and then looking at ADHD. So the first point I'll make with ADHD, you're right. ADHD is real. It can impact the person's ability to function. I see it in my practice. What happens is we kind of take this all or none approach. And so I think that is dangerous in a lot of ways. And I think there has to be a gray area. Yes, if all of us took a stimulant right now, we would probably get a lot of things done. We would probably be more efficient. Our spouses would love us even better because we've got our honey to do chores. Everything would be great. However, I will share with you, and there's a lot of data to support this. A lot of people go undiagnosed with ADHD for many years. And when we look at demographics, especially women are underdiagnosed and minority populations. And there are a lot of biases there because, for example, in women, you may not see that hyperactivity.
Yeah, like a young boy.
Like a young boy, exactly. So I think we have to be mindful, is it ADHD? Is it depression? Is it anxiety? And no, I've never met anyone who necessarily just had ADHD as a solo condition. ADHD there's a lot of overlap with major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder. A lot of individuals with bipolar disorder can have ADHD. But the other population that we have to think about are individuals with substance use disorders. So what I have found in my practice over the years is that individuals who meet criteria for DSM criteria, which is our diagnostic statistical manual of which helps guide us in terms of coming to a diagnosis based on a person's narrative and clinical presentation. A lot of people with methamphetamine use disorder, I would say, had ADHD as children. That has been my experience. And so then they were taking stimulants. And then they stopped the stimulants, but then they started to notice that they were not functioning. And so maybe they couldn't find someone who was willing to prescribe them a stimulant legally. And so then they went the illegal route. And so then they started using methamphetamine. So that's a population as well that I think often goes unnoticed. With the opiate epidemic is one that it's obviously very sad. I think we all know somebody who's been affected by this epidemic, and it's ongoing, I would say. I would say also that we in the healthcare profession, some of it is our fault. And what I mean by that is that when pain became that extra vital sign, we wanted to treat pain, but I think maybe we were overzealous in terms of our prescribing habits. And that's not to say that we as a profession, as the collective, we're not doing it with good intentions. But I think there was also the push from pharmaceutical companies at the time. I know there's been a lot of documentaries about the opiate epidemic and what was happening, and the bureaucratic side of it, the side, and even the political side of it as well came into play. And so I think there was this push for physicians to write a little bit more extra of the oxycodone, write a little extra for the dilaudid, so to speak. And what happened was that along with people going in for dental procedures or surgical procedures, a lot of my patients will tell you that the way that their first relationship with an opiate, they were going in for a dental procedure or they had major surgery. And it wasn't that they were like, oh, I'm looking to get hooked on these pills. They started taking one, and then after another, they write that dopamine, that area in our brain, the brain, our pleasure center, it starts to light up for different things.
And it was already a preconceived notion in their head from a childhood, maybe where they had already taken ADHD or, are now off of that medication, or maybe they were prescribed an SSRI as a kid or something, and now they're not. And then they were at a predisposition almost. And some people are genetically predispositioned to be more addicted to those opiates.
Right. And if you have a family history of somebody who has a substance use disorder, that increases your risk. Yeah. And then we also have to think about there are so many other variables that can lead to someone developing an addiction, right? Which is destructive, and it becomes compulsive, and it impacts their ability to function. So I'll use the example with if you are experiencing homelessness, okay? A person who's experiencing homelessness is going to be on a little bit more high alert. They're going to be a little bit more hypervigilant than you and I would be that have a home to go to. Why is that? Well, we know that individuals who are experiencing homelessness are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. So you're going to be sleeping with one eye open. You don't want to go to bed. So what is going to help you stay up? A stimulant.
Yeah.
With opiates, for example, some people like the euphoric feeling that they get. Okay. Now, on the flip side, again, I told you we can't use this all or none dichotomy here. We have also seen where pain prescriptions or narcotics have actually been withheld from individuals that need them. Okay. So we don't want to overtreat pain, which I think we are guilty of as the collective. But we don't want to undertreat pain. So the population I'll give you an example of where pain is undertreated are individuals with sickle cell. Sickle cell is debilitating for people. And if you don't treat their pain, they're going to have worse health outcomes. Many people with sickle cell have depression. That makes sense, right? If you're in pain, you're going to be depressed. You can't do the things that you enjoy doing. And so a lot of times when people are coming into the hospital and they say, my pain is not well controlled, I'm in a sickle cell crisis, sometimes they get shunned, and that's not right either. So we have to think about who is in front of us. And just because that person has a history of a substance use disorder doesn't mean that we should not treat their pain adequately. So we don't want to penalize people. We don't want to undertreat, but we don't want to overtreat. Absolutely.
Well,
I feel like we could talk about this all day long.
So many things,
Yeah.
But I think the most important takeaway is our kids, our youth, the things that we can be doing to help them, the next generation that's coming. I think if we really truly want to change the trajectory of where our country's going from a substance abuse, from a health, from everything, it starts with our kids. And I think if we can, as a country, start investing in our kids and pouring back into them, like we've talked about on here, that we can see, a better trend than what's going on right now. But we appreciate you coming on today. If our listeners are listening to this and they said, hey, I want to figure out how I can connect with Dr. Clark and maybe some of his children books or things like that, how can they find you?
Absolutely. So they can find me on LinkedIn. If you just search my name, it should come up on LinkedIn. And then I also have an Instagram handle, which is TapKidMD. M as in Mary, D as in David, 81.
Perfect.
Sweet.
And then what are you going to give us for your rating on the bourbon?
Oak and Eden in bottle finished. I thought it was a very heavy oak flavor, like very, very heavy, very wood flavored aftertaste too. So it left me feeling like I just like tasted a stick. That's how I describe it. Not my favorite.
That comes from being a 90s kid. You've tasted a stick before.
Yeah, everybody's had a stick in their mouth. Okay, it's just part of growing up as a kid. I'm gonna land it at 8.0.
Man, we've been way off on our ratings here.
Sorry.
So we'll land at a 8.6. How does that sound? So
that sounds wrong,
but
off, yeah,
it'll be way off. But I don't have a calculator in front of me. So we appreciate all our listeners. However you stream this podcast, if you'd give us a rating and follow us on social media, and we'll see you next week. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
If you have any feedback or would like to be featured, reach out to us at bourbonandbusinesspodcast@gmail.com.
Or find us on Instagram at Bourbon and Business Podcast.
Thanks again for listening.
Follow us for more content and info on the next episode.